Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. Hope you can see me, but I know you can hear me. My name is Carrie Nye, and I'm one of the planners who will be working on the Region 2 plan with you all. As we get started, I just wanted to offer a few reminders about the virtual meeting to help it go smoothly. As Mark just mentioned, the meeting is being recorded. We'll be posting it to our website at aacounty.org/region2 at the conclusion, along with the meeting minutes. So sometime next week, hopefully. For members of the public who have joined us, please note that we're not actively monitoring the chat, but any comments that you make through the chat will be recorded for consideration. And there will be a brief public comment period at the end of the meeting. So to get us started with a review of the agenda, it's my pleasure to hand it off to SAC member Joe Franco, who was recently appointed by the county executive to serve as the chair for the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. So congratulations, Joe. And here is your agenda slide.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Really honored to be here tonight. Thank you for everybody. I know for those with parents with children, I know it's probably a little bit of a stressful day with the snow day that didn't quite happen. So thanks for being with us tonight. So just as we move forward here, just kind of a bit of housekeeping and just confirming our agenda tonight. So just, you all have received it in advance, but just know that we're going to do an introduction of some committee members here soon. And then we're going to talk about the region plan scope. And we're going to kind of go in depth into the charter and the handbook, the roles and responsibilities, the region plan schedule and timeline, as well as talk about future meetings. We're then going to have a review and orientation from the Office of Planning and Zoning staff. And then we're going to have a discussion about community outreach, which will really kind of hopefully dive into what we think we can do to really get the community's input. And then we're just going to have just some reminders about some, the housekeeping items that we need to make sure that we uphold as members of the SAC. And then we'll do questions and adjourn. We have this going till about 7:50. My goal is to run as tight a meeting as we can. I don't want to stifle conversation, but I do hope we can move along. And our goal would be that if possible, we can end a little earlier, since I know that this is a long time and it's the end of the day. But this is our first meeting, so I want to make sure that we capture everything as well. So the only other housekeeping item I have before we go into introducing, having committee members introduce themselves again, is just, if possible, if folks could stay on screen, and that one of my jobs is I'm an adjunct professor at George Washington University, and it's so hard when all you're talking to is blank screens on Zoom. So if you can try to stay on camera, but at the same time, we also know that you have other family obligations. So if you need to step away, that's totally fine. Don't need to be dismissed or anything. We will try to see it around 7 o'clock-ish if we're doing good on time. We may just take a 5-minute break just so people can get up and grab a glass of water or whichever. But also, if you need to do that while we're going through, please feel free to do that. But if you can just try to be attentive, try to stay on screen, I think this can make this meeting move faster and be as efficient as possible. So anything else, Mark or Carrie, before we go into introductions?
No, that sounds good. Go for it.
Okay, great. Well, perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and start introductions, and then what I'll do is, since I'll go ahead and introduce myself, and then I'll just call on members of the SAC. So just kind of listen out for your name if that works. So my name is Joe Franco. I am a father to Daniel and my wife here, and I've been in Anne Arundel County now for almost 16 years. And during the day, I'm the Vice President of Grassroots Advocacy for an organization called Leading Age, and we represent nonprofit aging services providers. So I have a keen interest in what's happens to our seniors and what resources our community has for them. And like I said, I'm also an adjunct professor at George Washington University. So I'm really excited to kind of see what we can do, to strengthen our community as we kind of think about these plans. So with that, we have a co-chair, a vice chair as well for this committee. So I'd like to turn it over to Keisha Baird to introduce herself. Keisha.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, everyone. My name is Keisha Baird. I currently reside in the Russet community in Laurel, Maryland. And I've lived here for about 2 years, new homeowner. And I work in Baltimore City for Baltimore Gas and Electric. Excited to work with you all.
Excellent. Well, excited, and thank you for being vice chair. Kimmy Adetola. Kimmy, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone. Nice to meet everyone again. My name is Kemi Adetola. I actually live not too far from the Russet. It's actually off Whiskey Bottom. And we've been in the Laurel area almost 10 years now. My husband and I were the leaders of the African Diaspora Affairs of Arundel County. And I work in the life settlement industry. So that's a little bit about myself. Thank you.
Great. The next person on the committee is Guernica Bourne. I hope I pronounced your name right.
Yes, it's one of the many ways to pronounce it. My name's Gornika Bourne. I live in Russet along with Keisha. I am the vice president of the HOA. I've lived in Russet since 1999. I've came to Maryland from New Orleans via the US Navy. And I'm really excited to help get some progress for our county.
Great. And next person we'll introduce is Thomas, I believe it's Foss. Thomas Foss.
Hi, yes, good evening. Thomas Foss. I work for Corporate Office Properties Trust. I've been working in Anne Arundel County for about 15 years now in a development and construction capacity. And I'm a director of development that's got a lot of experience in land use in Anne Arundel County. Happy to be a part of the group.
That's great, thank you. And next person is Patience Frisbee. Patience?
Hello, I am Patience Frisbee. I live in Russet. I live in an apartment. The new name is Cross Point at Russet. And I work at AMI. I just recently changed jobs, but I'm very excited to be part of this board.
Great. Nishara Hilton.
Hi. Let me turn my thing on.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, how are you? So my name is Nishara Hilton. Currently a graduate in public health, minor in theaters, arts, and am an ambitious master's for MPH and MBB right now. Just excited to be a part of this and really understand more about development and be able to have a say in helping to make Anne Arundel County a lot better.
Fantastic, great. Jim Kropf, are you with us, Jim?
I am. Thank you so much. My name is Jim Kraft. I'm a lifelong resident of Anne Arundel County. Also been doing business here in the county for over 20 years. My current role is with Elm Street Development, where I'm a vice president, and we focus on residential land development and building new communities, many in the areas where folks are from. I'm excited to be part of the group, and thank you for having me.
Great. And next person is Val Kravitz. Val?
Hey, thank you. It's good to meet everyone. Let me just get my phone set up here. My
No
video
problem.
set up. All right, can you see me?
Hey, Val.
Hey, I'm an engineer. I live in Anne Arundel County, Hanover, Maryland area, in the Shipley Homestead community, which is pretty new, a couple years old. And I work as a contractor for the Department of Defense. I've been doing that for over 12 years, so I'm very familiar with the area and community. Been working here for that many years. So excited to be part of the process and looking forward to working with all of you.
Great, thanks, Val. And our next person is Kevin Mcpartland.
Hi, I'm Kevin Mcpartland. Live in Jessup. I've lived here for 32 years, raised 2 daughters here who went to Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I'm a registered architect, so I've just interested in these issues. And I was a part of the small area plan back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. Right now I also teach as an adjunct professor at Anne Arundel Community College.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. All right. And our next person is Angela Thomas. Angela? Angela, are you here?
Yeah, she may not be able to join us.
No
this evening.
problem.
Yep.
And do we have Mark Thompson from Stronach?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Thompson. I'm Senior Vice President of Development for First Properties, which is their real estate group as part of the Stronach Group and the Maryland Jockey Club at Laurel Park. And I'm excited to be participating. I head up the redevelopment effort for both Pimlico and Laurel Park for the company, working with the Maryland Stadium Authority and the county and the city of Baltimore. So we have a lot going on and really excited about being a part of this plan. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. And we have Marilee Tortorelli. Marilee?
Hi, I'm Marilee Tortorelli. I'm a landscape architect. I've worked in Anne Arundel County for 33 years. I've worked for a multidisciplinary firm in Laurel, and I'm glad to be a part of this.
Great. And we have April Walker.
Hello, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, good. I live in Shipley Farm Road in Jessup, and I've lived here about 30 years with my husband, and I raised 2 kids, and we participated past our kids in the Jessup Province Youth Organization. And I've been a member of the JIA, which is the Community Association, and also volunteered at the school and various other things. And my kids are grown up now, and I'm very happy to be part of this.
Excellent. All right. And then we have Nicole Walsh Meadows.
Hello, my name is Nicole Walsh Meadows. I've been in the county about 18 years now. I'm a career healthcare provider. My husband's been a policeman in the county for 22 years. Got 2 kids, and look forward to serving the community. Been on my HOA here in my new neighborhood for 2 years and was a board member in Russet and ran the security committee there for 8 years.
That's great. Well, perfect. Well, this is just such a great group. I'm really, really pleased that, Anne Arundel County was able to get such a diverse and wonderfully unique set of individuals that represents a really great, unique part of this district too, as part of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time for this. It's really nice to get to see you all again. I feel so fortunate that we were able to meet together in person. I feel like we just barely made it with Omicron, but we were able to do it. So it's nice for us to have that picture and to connect. And then I know that it's nice to reacquaint ourselves with each other in 2022. So with that, our next item is to go into kind of the region plan scope. And I know that Mark is going to kind of give us, a great overview of the charter and the handbooks, but also just about how this process works. So Mark, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Joe. And I forget if Carrie had mentioned earlier, Carrie and I will be the project managers for Region 2 for this planning process. So I do, and we'll be able to provide our contact information at the end of the presentation in case you'd like to get in touch with us. So I do want to provide sort of just an overview of the region plan scope. And Carrie and I will be tag teaming this presentation as well, just so that you don't hear me for an hour and a half or so. So try to break it up a little bit. But I do want to just, again, go over the scope and the purpose and the responsibilities of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. If folks from the Stakeholder Advisory Committee do have questions throughout our presentation, feel free to jump in. And as Joe had mentioned, we'll have some public comment at the end. But again, for the SAC members, feel free to jump in with a question if you have one. I also do want to mention that we'll frequently recall the scope and the purpose of these plans as we go through this process to make sure that we're all on the same page, just so it's a nice reminder and sort of touchstone as we go through of what we're working towards and what the roles and responsibilities are. So with the handbook, this handbook is available to the public. It's on our website. The website there is highlighted, aacounty.org/region plans. And this really just does provide an overview of the region plan process, the purpose, as well as the steps in the region plan process. So it's a good quick reference guide for folks. And again, this is the Region 2, 4, and 7 is the first phase. The other 6 regions will be following up in the next few years as well. So they'll be also using this handbook throughout their processes as well. So I also do want to jump into sort of the region plan reach. What what topics are we going to be exploring? What topics aren't we going to be exploring? Just keep in mind that this is a land use plan. And so we'll be looking at how Region 2 grows, as well as preserves the assets for the next 20 years. There are certain areas that are underdeveloped that might be ripe for redevelopment. And then there are certain environmental areas that are just, prime assets for the community that need to be protected, not only for the next 20 years, but probably in perpetuity. And we'll be getting into that a little bit as well. So like I said, this is a land use plan, but there's a lot of interconnectedness with land use. So we'll be talking about transportation, public safety, like I said, protection of environmental resources, as well as some other items that I've listed out in a couple slides ahead here. So the region plan will also be a tool to evaluate rezoning requests and guiding capital improvement program recommendations as well. So again, these are kind of tools that, or let me back up, is the region plan is a policy guide. And then there's a variety of tools that we can use to implement this guide. Rezoning or zoning is one. The capital improvement program, like I said, or capital improvement projects is another tool. We've got a great graphic ahead as well that illustrates it in case you're a visual person. Moving on then to sort of what we're trying to answer, sort of going along with what this reach is. And so some of these are, I don't necessarily want to read each one of these, but just to give you a flavor of what the plan, sort of how in depth we're going to be going with these items, what research is done to help answer some of the questions that help inform the goals, policies, and strategies. So again, we'll be usually using these questions. These are good questions to, if you're on the SAC, good questions to keep asking yourself as well as you're meeting with folks in the community and sort of just getting a sense, like, another way to sort of help sort of drill down in some of the questions that you ask people, or how to get into some of the specifics when you're talking to your HOA or your friends and neighbors in the community. These are good things that you can ask them and certainly bring back to us as at the Office of Planning and Zoning, or again, providing them our information if they want to get in touch with us directly. So again, emphasizing that there's a relationship among all these questions and how it answers to land use. So for example, a community with limited access to parks or green space may be experiencing a land use challenge, or in other words, there is not enough land that has been allocated through, say, the planned land use map or through zoning for that purpose. So we'll be looking at that. But then I also want to emphasize that there's this relationship amongst various master plans within the county and outside of the Office of Planning and Zoning. For example, there's a Land Parks and Preservation Plan conducted by the Department of Recreation and Parks that also looks at park equity throughout the county. And so we want to keep all these other plans sort of in mind. And this is when we're going to have other departments present and share some of the work that they do, so that you understand some of how interrelated some of these concepts are. Not only the concepts, but also the physical plans that other departments prepare in concert with what we do here with the region plan in the context of Plan 2040. I might have been a lot in one sentence there. I realize that, but again, this is just an intro. We'll be talking about more as we go along, and you'll actually get some more tangible examples as we work through this process as well. We're not just going to throw you in here and ask you to start, working with us on some goals, policies, and strategies. You'll be getting a good foundation to help inform or help educate you on providing some good guidance here as we go along. Let's see. So there are some guardrails with our region plans. This is all working within the context of Plan 2040 as well. So these region plans, they have to be legally sound. They can't conflict with federal, state, or county laws. And And you might be tempted to, sometimes it's always a fine line. As we're talking about what works, what doesn't work in the region, you might be tempted to talk about littering or pest control. And we won't necessarily be talking about those because those aren't the land use issues. And again, we'll be talking about this. You won't be wrong if you bring them up. We'll just be talking about how it's connected then to land use and our ultimate goal of creating these goals, policies, and strategies that we can then begin implementing at the end of the process. I always do want to throw out a PSA for the county that if you do have any concerns about littering or trash or pest control, the county does have a 311 system that you can go online. It's on the website. And if you can't find it right away, there is the search bar, just type in 311. And you're able to just report some of these short-term issues that can be solved, hopefully relatively quickly, if there is a littering issue or something like that. So again, aacounty.org/311 is also the web address for that. Any questions so far? I know we sort of touched on some of this at our kickoff event last month, but hopefully some of it's starting to soak in a little bit. And again, don't worry if you don't have questions now. We can always discuss those at a later meeting, or again, feel free to email. Any questions? I'll take a minute here. Okay. So let me move on then to the roles and responsibilities for our Stakeholder Advisory Committee. Just as a reminder, committee has been appointed by the county executive and approved by a resolution of the county council to serve in this role. Your primary role is to help answer the questions highlighted on this slide. Basically, what are community members concerned about? What is the vision for the future? I like to sort of summarize these 5 bullets into 4 categories. So connecting with the community, we want you all as representatives on the SAC to be talking this up with your community. You might hear me say this a lot, it's a two-way street, that we want you to be sharing information that you're hearing here and learning here with your community, as well as getting information from those folks in the community and bringing that back to us. We're sharing amongst the SAC as well. So connecting and then collaborating with the Office of Planning and Zoning staff, and advising us then as we go through this process, advising us on the language for the goals, policies, and strategies that we've talked about. And you might, so I'll just take a quick break here. You might hear me talk about goals, policies, strategies a lot. A good way to sort of see what I'm referring to is if you look at Plan 2040, that's the way we've organized, or that's the structure of the plan, so that we see sort of, again, goal being the top tier, policy is how we plan to, is sort of the policy of the goal, and then the strategy is how we would then implement that sort of concept through that hierarchy. So that's what we're going to be working on here in the region plans, those goals, policies, and strategies. So you'll be advising us on those. And then lastly, advocating. So as we get to the review and ultimately the legislative process, you'll be advocating that you were part of this committee, that we would hope that you support these goals if we've advanced it that far, that you would then be advocating to the Planning Advisory Board as well as the County Council. So again, we want to keep these questions in mind as we progress through the discussion, and then clearly as we go through the region plan process over the next year. So.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Feel free anytime, guys, to just jump in and interrupt if you have questions. Again, I know we keep saying that, but we love to hear questions. So since Mark went over the purpose and scope of the plan, and again, we will revisit abbreviated versions of that as we go forward, just to make sure we're always on the same page. We do want to move into working with you all, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, on defining some of the parameters of how you work together. So Hopefully everyone was able to access the committee charter over the past month. I know that the Google, the G Drive access was a challenge for some folks. If you weren't able to review the charter ahead of today, let Mark and I know, and we'll work with you to get situated. But we're going to spend a few minutes now discussing some of the flexible items in the charter and addressing with you things that you might like to refine or revise as we go forward. So Mark and I went through and kind of picked out some stuff that we thought might be of particular interest to the SAC, or items that we figured needed to be clarified. But if there are items that you observed in the charter on your own that you also want to kind of have us take a look at during the meeting, we can definitely do that. I've just got 3 slides to get through, and then we can pivot to kind of personal questions. But this first thing that I just wanted to highlight is the guiding principles that are part of the charter. And again, we have asked folks to sign the charter and to indicate their agreement with it. So just to make sure that you're all on board with these guiding principles, these are developed from Plan 2040. They are the principles that we try to lead with in the planning office. So this is pretty consistent across our work products, but I did want to make sure if folks want the opportunity to add new principles or to clarify or redefine any, this would be a great time to do that. But the 5 principles that we try to lead with in the office are inclusivity, respect, health, environmental protection, and equity. And our goal at the end of this process is to make sure that the plan that we deliver together is able to bring these principles about and reflect these principles for the community. So I'll pause for just a minute to see if there's any questions or concerns about this.
No, I think Carrie, I think that this is really helpful, and I like in the charter and handbook too, it just talks about consensus as well. And I think that that's important because we are going to have different opinions. That's the point of having such a diverse group. And I think it's just important that we make sure everybody's heard, but that we also just make sure that we respect each other and do come to consensus so we can move forward. And I like these principles because they make it pretty clear.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, and I appreciate that there's a definition. So if we ever need to refer back to what it means, what definition of equity we're using, or of respect, for example, the charter is going to be the place that we can do that together. Okay, I'll go ahead and move on. But again, questions are welcome. So this is a particular part of the charter that Mark and I identified as a place that we'd like to offer some clarification. So this is from section 3.1 of the charter. It's on page 3 of the PDF if you're following along on a computer screen. But the highlighted language that says public input will not be received out of defined time periods opened by the Stakeholder Advisory Committee Chair. The purpose of that language was to clarify during these SAC meetings. These are work group meetings for the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. These are separate from the quote unquote public forums that we'll be having, where the primary goal is to talk directly to the public. These are separate from opportunities outside of these meetings to work with the public. So anything like in-person engagement, any sort of surveys that we're doing, door-to-door work, community events. We feel that this language kind of needed to be specified, that what we're actually saying is this proposed revision below, that the Stakeholder Advisory Committee Chair can solicit public input at defined times during the SAC meetings. So we just want to make that clarification and propose to you all that hopefully you would approve this clarification and ask if there's any other things that need to be redefined in this particular paragraph.
Yeah, would love folks' thoughts on this. I mean, I think the idea is that we just want to make sure this is, a productive working meeting, because we all are volunteering to do this. But at the same time, we do appreciate members of the public that do join. So we just want it to be orderly, so that way we can stay on track, but also get member and public input. But then also, more importantly, we're getting our goal is to get public input by us being in the community, right? It's not to have the public come to us. We want to go out into the public. So I think that's the other reason why we want to try to limit the scope of the work of the committee meeting, so we can have more time to be out in the public getting feedback. But would love other folks' feedback as well.
I'm not opposed to having a public comment period at the end of SAC meetings. If you want to limit it to, like they do for the budget town halls, 2 minutes per person for a defined period of time, you know, the last 10 minutes of the meeting or the last 15 minutes of the meeting, et cetera, like, you know, the Open Meeting Act stated or what have you. I'm not opposed to that. We do have members that can't attend, you know, certain meetings, but this one works better for them or what have you. We need to solicit as much input as we can. And if this meeting works better for them, I'm not opposed to 2 minutes for an individual who couldn't make their HOA meeting, but this one worked better for them and wants to give us some little nugget of information.
Very helpful, Nicole. Thank you. So Carrie, do we need a motion on this or do we just?
I'm going to suggest to you that we do a motion at the end if you are all in agreement with this and the next change that we'll propose. So if that makes sense, but I will take the indicator to go ahead and move on to the next slide. So this is going to get us into that consensus discussion that Joe mentioned. And when Mark and I were looking at this, we initially started by coming up with a definition for non-policy versus strategy and consensus decisions, but then we realized it's just a little bit out of the scope of what we think the SAC will primarily be voting on. So we're proposing these revisions to clarify when we expect votes to be needed. Primarily, we think, based on our experience with previous planning efforts with the county, that the SAC is going to need to vote primarily on like routine procedural issues. So that would be things like approving agendas and previous meeting minutes. You may all decide that you want to add a second SAC meeting a particular month. So that would be something that would need to be voted on. Or when we get to the point of recommending the plan or providing formal letters of support, that will be something that the SAC needs to vote on. There aren't going to be as many opportunities for what this originally identified as policy and strategy consensus decisions. So we are proposing this clarification, and for times, there may be also times when a vote is required because there's a deadline for a deliverable. For example, we may need the vision statement by a certain time, or we may need you to approve, you know, a public engagement report that we did by a certain time. And so on cases like that, where the consensus isn't obvious, but we still need a vote, then I'm going to kind of pair these two slides together. We would kind of we would try to work through this consensus process that Joe kind of hinted at earlier. This is the slide, this is attachment B in the charter that I hope everyone else had the chance to review. But between this kind of self-reflective guide on how to achieve consensus and understand that not everything's black and white, and this, wrong direction there. And this potentially revised language about clarifying when votes are needed, it's just a 51% majority vote. We were hoping that you all would agree with us that this language is more straightforward and applicable to what the SAC is likely to be doing. So first, why don't we take a second to sort of, you know, how do you guys feel about this change, or how do you all feel about this proposed revision? And we can also talk about the continuum, the consensus continuum guide if you would like to as well. So again, all we're doing here is just going from 2/3 to 51% majority of the quorum, and clarifying that most votes will be procedural, and not making a distinction between procedural and policy.
I'll move to endorse that change, all of the changes, Carrie.
Great.
Can I just ask a question on
absolutely.
So then on the policy and strategy consensus decisions, how are we going to make those decisions? Is there a process or?
So we would, and Mark, you could jump in to help me out on this one if I'm digging myself in here, but for what a policy and strategy consensus decision, we're not really, I'm just going to be honest, I'm not really sure what that means. We don't have like a set series of votes that you guys will all be taking, and some of them are consensus and some of them are policy, right? So that's why we're proposing this 51% majority. And then on cases where I think the implication of this text is that policy and strategy decisions are more complex, maybe more complicated, potentially there's more room for disagreement and discussion. For topics that are like that, we would just remind folks that this is the guide that we're kind of proposing, the exercise that we're proposing for how to reach consensus, but the vote would still be 51%. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
And so for the non-policy versus policy, I understand more of the policy decision because you're saying it would be more I guess difficult to come to a consensus versus non-policy. Like, can you give an example of what you mean by non-policy? Just so I can, because when I first initially looked at this, I was thinking 51% seems a little low, but maybe I'm confused on exactly what the difference is.
Yeah, sure. I think so. A non-policy decision again would be something, what we're calling procedural, something that you guys need to do in order to conduct your business. So for example, approving an agenda for the meeting or approving the last meeting's minutes. So in other words, decisions that are being made where there's not necessarily contention. And then something that, I mean, might be like a policy or strategy decision. An example of that might be if you decided as a stakeholder advisory committee to endorse or not endorse certain parts of a work plan, for example. You know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so for the most, but that would also still be 51%, or would that, like all of that would be 51% now instead?
I think that's what we would require. But then again, like Joe and you guys as the SAC are deciding when to take a vote. So, you know, somebody has to make a motion, somebody has to second it. And if we get into a situation where, you know, it's clear that something doesn't have strong support, then you may decide to go through this consensus process where you're sort of working with each other to reflect, oh, sorry, I didn't hit the slide, to reflect on where the hangups are. Are you all the way left category stop? You can't abide by this decision, or are you more of a hold? You believe more work is needed and we need more discussion, right? So we're saying, Mark and I are trying to suggest that we don't make a distinction between procedural and policy decisions, because most of the work will be procedural, but we want to be aware that there does need to be some reflection when there are things that are more contentious. However, if you guys don't agree with this change or you want to think about it more, Mark and I would be happy to like summarize and send some talking points after the meeting to continue the discussion, I think.
I have a question.
Sure.
Where would the zoning and planning decisions fall? Would those be policy and strategy decisions?
I'm gonna let Mark handle that one.
Yeah, that would be right.
So you're saying, yes, they would fall in the policy and strategy decisions, which are currently listed for a 2/3 majority vote?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, that's one way that we could update this. If you like the 2/3 majority vote for things like that, we could just clarify that policy, we could define policy and strategy as like specifically certain sorts of things like zoning and land use, for example, or
give various examples of those types of decisions.
Yeah, if that's what you guys want, we're happy to like come up with some definitions that make this easier. And stick with the 2/3.
Be required before. I personally am not willing to agree to this change until there's more delineation of what exactly policy and strategy consensus decisions are, until you spell that out a little more clearly.
Yeah, I mean, part of the challenge with that is that we don't have all the answers about what sorts of decisions you may all need to vote on going forward. So I am doing my best to make sure that you know, we're trying to like create a process that's flexible. However, I understand the sort of need for clarification on some of the more serious decision-making that you may be asked to do. So we can definitely provide some definitions. We can try to clarify that more if that works.
Well, yeah, because you told us in the last meeting that some of these decisions would have to be made with a quick turnaround, and then you're asking us to, you know, do this even more. Yeah, I would like a little more definition before I agree to something like this.
If I may,
Sure.
it seems like the point of this is to make it so we don't have to define it. I mean, this change is going to make it, everything is a majority decision. And I can see cases where, what if we don't get 2/3 majority on a decision? Then what, we just don't have an answer for that issue? I mean, it seems like majority rules. And if we don't have to define different types of questions, that just leaves that whole mess out of the question.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you're saying. I think the only thing is that for, I guess, decisions, maybe it doesn't have to be 2/3, but maybe like a little more than 51%, maybe like 60% or something like that, so that there's like more people would agree with something, if that makes any sense.
But what happens if we
Yeah.
get a majority, but not a super majority? Then what do? We just
That's what
don't approach that issue?
the next slide is for.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
that's
mean-
the idea, that we then work on that consensus, and we got to get more people to move from hold or stop to stand
Yeah.
aside or agree.
I think maybe one other issue to consider too is because this is how with a lot of boards, you know, you have to have a quorum of so many members of the committee to sort of ensure that this is a broad representation of the committee's view, and not, you know, not that, you know, but something happens and a bunch of people can't make it, and then all of a sudden a decision's made and it's only a small group of the committee. So maybe that's something to throw in too.
Yeah, and I don't think 51%, I think it's too low for big policy decisions. Why do you want to change it? Did you have issues with it?
I don't know that issues is how I would describe it, but we wanted to simplify it and allow it to be flexible. You know, if someone thinks something is a non-policy decision and someone else thinks it's a policy decision, I mean, these things aren't spelled out in the code. So, but what we can do, it sounds like, I mean, I don't want to step on Joe's toes here, but sounds like we need to maybe offer some definitions and revisit this. We can summarize kind of the discussion points for you all after this meeting. I think there's been some good points made.
Or maybe
And then
60% or something like that. Because like most of them, but I don't want to speak for everybody, but like a lot of people are saying like they want to differentiate between everything. So if you want to come to a consensus for all of it, maybe raising that threshold just a little bit might kind of satisfy both sides. That's just my opinion though.
So Kara, if we don't make the change on the second piece, it sounded like the first piece was fine, but the second piece, we would keep section 5.4 as it currently reads. That's in place, and then we can decide to change it later if we need to. That's an option as well?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And that
mean, we
kinda
also
sounds like
don't have to
progress.
change, we don't have to change it again. This was Mark and I reviewing with the other region plan teams and trying to look at items that were either challenging to enact or that
Yeah.
were confusingly worded or that didn't meet the intent of the language. So this is one that we thought was maybe going to be challenging to enact, but it sounds like, I mean, yes, what you're saying is correct. If you don't make a decision, the language will stand as it is until a future date if you decide to act on changing the language.
Yeah, I sort of see it as, I think, as Kevin articulated earlier, it's just a matter of simplicity where the time that we spend now getting on the same page about when a vote is needed is less time later than you might have to deliberate about what type of vote it is and what the threshold is.
So can you give us some criteria for that before the next meeting?
Yes, we can work on that.
Perfect.
So it sounds like then we will then have a revised motion to make the first change. If we go back to the public comment. Yep, that one. So it sounds like the change to section 3.1 seemed like we had a motion for that, and we like that. Does anybody else want to second that? And then we can at least move forward with that change. Looks like Nicole will second. So, and it's fine. I know we didn't talk, so if people do have questions about this, but I think this makes sense with the public input. Any other? No objections? Hearing no objections, we'll make that change to section 3.1. And then we'll have staff come back and make recommendations for section 5.4, and we can discuss that at the next meeting. Great.
Great. I also want to apologize to folks that I keep accidentally like making the slide go forward and backward. I'm using two computers and
no, it's fine.
Okay, great. So we did have this here to pause for questions or any sort of opportunities or other items with the charter that folks might want to weigh in on. And I can't help it now, but I have this note that comes up saying these are due February 5th. However, given the ongoing conversation, we will not have these be due February 5th. So you guys can all just count on Mark and I to follow up with you with definitions and potential options, and we can revisit that at a future date. Right, Mark? Probably have to have these signed before the next meeting, at least in their current form.
Yeah, it would be ideal. Again, along with some of the other reminders Carrie will give you later, but we just do want a good foundation for everybody to start off on, like the Open Meetings Public Act, the ethics, charter, make sure that we're all pulling from the same documents, same understanding and expectations.
Great. So does anyone have any questions about anything that's been preceded this slide? Great. So now we're going to move into a review of sort of the schedule and timeline and format for the meetings. And I'm going to hand it over to Mark for that.
Yeah, so we'll go through the schedule, the timelines, or the format. We have received some questions about, are we going to be meeting in person, virtually? So again, given the current conditions with the pandemic, we'll be meeting virtually until further notice. And we plan on meeting every month. As Carrie mentioned earlier, there might be times where we need to meet twice a month if there's a certain topic that we're talking about and the discussion goes over, say, the time allotted or additional time that we all want to spend. We can schedule something for the next week or a couple weeks later. But again, just noting that there might be some months where we meet twice just to finish up any additional business or have additional conversation. So when we, if you remember back during when you submitted your applications to serve on the SAC, you had filled out just a brief poll of when you would be available throughout the week and then times during the week. And then I had also followed up with another doodle poll that was based on that. And it looked like most folks were available on Thursdays at 6 p.m. And so if we're going to have a meeting once a month, and this seems like the ideal time, does a Thursday at 6 work? And to be more specific, does the third Thursday of every month work for folks?
How should I guess, how should we have people register that they can? I'm just trying to think. Should they we have people use the raise hand function in Zoom just so you can see that, or should we just have people who say it won't work for them? And how do you want to do that?
I think if there's any objections, might be
Okay.
easier. Because I think, Joe, as you went through the list, and I can't keep a tally here on the side, but I think Angela was the only one that wasn't able to attend.
Yeah.
So again, the fact that 14 out of 15 folks are here is fantastic. So again, does anybody have any objections to the third Thursday of every month as a starting point?
I don't think I got to do the poll.
Okay.
I can of course work around Thursdays, but maybe like a Monday evening or something like that would personally work better. Or even, well, even Sunday evening, but like a Monday evening or something like that.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's.
Okay, and the other thing that we need to watch out too is for county council meetings. So typically we don't have any other governmental meetings on Monday nights. And then Wednesday nights are planning advisory boards. And then Carrie and I also are project managers for the Yerington Town Center, and we typically meet on a Tuesday evening every month. So.
Hey, Mark, I can definitely do third Thursday because every fourth Thursday, I do have another prior engagement. And
Okay.
every Monday, I do have prior engagement as well. So
Okay.
Thursday seems to work perfect for me, but the third Thursday is perfectly fine.
Okay, good. Okay.
Well, Mark, I think we have consensus on the third Thursday.
That's good.
Great.
Great. Okay. Let's see. So moving on then to a couple of these other bullets, just some other housekeeping items. We'll anticipate to send an agenda out a couple weeks beforehand, as well as any additional materials that you'll need to review before that meeting so that you can come prepared to discuss. And again, as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, these meetings will be recorded and they'll be posted on the county's YouTube channel, but we'll also provide a link to that recording through the Region Plan website, or we also call it our hub website, and that's aacounty.org/region2. We've got that URL listed throughout this slideshow, so don't feel bad if you didn't catch it there. Moving on to the schedule and timeline. So here, just want to sort of give you an indication, because we have also received a lot of questions about, well, what's the time commitment throughout this process? So really that first phase, we're through all that. We had our kickoff last month. You all submitted some applications to participate on the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. So you put a little bit of time into that. During that green and this orange phase, or the first part of that orange phase, you'll be putting in a lot more time. Like I said, meetings once a month, maybe twice a month, as we go through several topics, which I'll note here in the next slide. So, and maybe I'll say that because it's listed out a little bit better in that next slide. But just again, emphasizing that the bulk of the work will be happening over the next year. And then as the plan goes out for public review, we'll meet periodically, really just to come back, talk about what comments people had, the public had on the plan when we get to that point. And then a meeting before the plan goes to the Planning Advisory Board, again, just to express support for the plan, to advance it to that phase, and then ultimately to County Council. So again, the amount of time that you'll be putting in is sort of ramping up now, and then it'll taper off throughout the rest of the process over the last probably 6 months, 10 months of this process. So then diving in a little bit more here specifically about generally when we're going to be talking about certain things. Like I said, for the next 8 months or so, 10 months, we'll be having presentations from county departments where we'll just share information on what some of the challenges and opportunities or updates to Plan 2040 there have been on these various topics: economy, public health, transportation, so on. You as a committee will also be developing a vision statement. This process will happen after we have a public forum on visioning, so that before the Stakeholder Advisory Committee talks about visioning, we want to open it up to the community, have a public forum, have an online survey, so that people can share their ideas of again, how the region should grow and what assets to protect over the next 20 years, again, very generally. And then you all, after hearing all that information from the public, will be able to craft a vision statement from that input from the public. Throughout the process, again, over the next 10 months or so, we'll be having a survey as well as some online input. Currently, there is a survey up on that hub website where you can just share some of the opportunities and challenges within the community. In February, we're going to be having a feedback map, which I'll provide an example here a few slides later. And then additional surveys as needed. I think it's always good to just always have that portal for the public to share their thoughts about what's working, what's not working. And then the Office of Planning and Zoning might have more tailored surveys throughout the year as well. So again, building that foundation, getting an education of what's working, what's not working from the various departments in the county, and again, what those issues are within each region, hearing from the community, hearing from you all, what some of those issues may be. Carrie and I will start drafting a set of goals and policies and strategies, trying to address those items. And we'll be tackling that again, after those topic meetings. Carrie and I will be doing that, but then we'll be presenting that after all the departments have had the opportunity to present. So we'll anticipate to finish that up in the fall of this year. And then afterwards, we'll have an opportunity for you all to comment on those goals, policies, and strategies. And we'll be also talking about planned land use and zoning. So we need to make sure, again, we have that information, what the, I don't necessarily want to say criteria, but what those policies are, those land use policies that we're developing, so that they can have the foundation or set the bar for how we're going to be evaluating actual land use and zoning in the region. During that time frame, we'll also have a draft preliminary draft. That's actually what we call it here, of the plan, and then we'll put that up for public review. And there will be, again, another public forum as well as an online survey for that draft. And then next year, we'll be getting into that legislation phase of the Planning Advisory Board reviewing it, and then ultimately it going to County Council for their adoption. So I'll take a minute. Anybody have any questions on this? And again, this is, each one of these should probably have an asterisk because it can always, we're working on a flexible schedule here. As we discussed, if there are certain topics that you want to dive a little deeper into, we can do that. We can have another meeting, and it could always just kind of push the schedule out a little bit. But I also want everybody to keep in mind that, again, we're the first phase of 3 phases, and we don't want to hold up then the other 2 phases, which have to be completed in the next 8 years before we start on our county-wide master plan again. So we do have some wiggle room, but again, I think we do want to stay on a good schedule here. Any questions?
Mark?
So far? Yeah.
Just curious, how many meetings do you anticipate the county departmental presentations taking? Are they going to be multiple departments presenting in one evening, or do you envision one department for every meeting and it's stretching out a bit over time?
Yeah, we anticipate one department at one meeting. There might be meetings where we have 2 departments come in. Let me just pull up region plans. Let me just pull this up real quick, our own schedule here For example, the economy and public health that, or public safety, public amenities, that might get merged into one meeting. But on the flip side, we have transportation and land use. And as you can imagine, that might take a little bit more time. So we might need actually a couple meetings for that. But really, all in all, we anticipate probably about 10 or so meetings to get through all those topics. So again, 10 months, but again, give or take another month if you all want to meet to discuss some more.
Mark?
Yep.
I had a question. So as they're presenting each meeting, are we going to be taking a look at that the plan and the maps themselves? And maybe like, is it like a markup that we can do in real time together as a team and then kind of put comments on that to edit the plan 2040? If it's like transportation, for example, and we have like an idea about what the public says and our own opinions about that.
Yeah, so what we were anticipating, that's a good question, is we would provide you the a snippet from Plan 2040's background report on that topic. We would provide you a snippet from where that topic is addressed in Plan 2040, so that you see sort of that background report, how it informed then the goals, policies, strategies for that topic in Plan 2040. And then the Office of Planning and Zoning would be working with the department beforehand and get you some materials, like sort of a highlight list or a bulleted list or a summary of those issues, ongoing issues, I guess, as well as any other studies that may have been conducted since that background report or Plan 2040. Summarize that for you all, but also provide you a hyperlink or some more information where you can find the whole report if you want to dig a little deeper. And I think on that sort of summary sheet that we would provide you might be a good opportunity for you all to then collaborate on and add anything else that you think is missing from that. If that answers your question.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, two-way street. You're going to hear me say that probably a lot.
I have a question. When we are seeking community input and surveys and things like that, are we looking at that or getting the input and then say waiting for a specific period, or are there other things going on at the same time as we're working on community input?
So as the SAC, your role is really to, you don't necessarily have to develop the surveys or anything like that. It's really just to talk with friends, family, your HOA, any other community organizations that you're a part of. And you can share with them and say, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about in the next meeting. What are the issues that you'd like me to bring up during that the SAC meeting? And I think that would be a good way to go about this. But again, we don't expect you all to craft your own surveys or organize grand events, because we will have, on the Office of Planning and Zoning, we'll be developing our own sort of structured events for public input on some of these items.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on then to the next item here on the agenda of review and orientation. Looking at the Maryland Department of Planning Education resources, as well as Plan 2040, I've talked about that a lot. That being the countywide master plan that we just wrapped up this past spring. So again, just want to give ourselves a little bit of space to talk about this and sort of get folks' idea on, was this helpful? Were there things that were there modules, because there were 5 of them here? Were there items that you didn't quite understand, or things that you'd like us to talk a little bit more about? Again, just really making sure that you have some of the fundamental planning concepts. So again, so that we're kind of using the same vocabulary or terms or concepts as we go through this process. So again, I'm going to open that up. This is more of a conversation about how folks felt about here, the Maryland Department of Planning resources. Did everybody have a chance to review those, skim them? Any preliminary thoughts? And if anything, right, we're the first phase, and for the future phases, if this didn't quite work out, or if there are certain tips that you have for us about what worked or didn't work, we can make those changes then when we do those future phases as well. So again, you're in a safe space here. We're in the trust tree. You can be critical. You can say they were great. Anything you'd like to share, or we can. What we can also do is we can hold another meeting, and if you all would like, we can sort of walk through maybe some of the highlights of each of these individual modules. Yeah, I'm getting some nods of the head. So
yeah, I thought the material was actually interesting and pretty, I guess, in depth, but it was just a lot of material. That's all I think I would say. In addition to, of course, reviewing the plan itself, it was just a lot of reading material. So I think it would be helpful to kind of have like a high level overview of some of the highlights that we have from the modules.
Okay. And the thought would be that we wouldn't necessarily do it here at this meeting, since we've only given ourselves about 10-15 minutes, but we can schedule a meeting to give us, again, a little more space to go over those and allow you to ask any questions or provide any comments. Okay. So those were the Maryland Department of Planning resources. Moving on then to Plan 2040. Again, I hope folks at least had a chance to look through Plan 2040. There were 2 volumes to it. Volume 1 is really the meat of it. It provides you the goals, policies, and strategies, and then as well as the implementation report at the end to show you how we actually plan to implement this. So it doesn't just sit on a shelf, but it actually has some direction on how we're going to resolve some of these issues or things that we need to do to actually implement those recommendations. And then volume 2 being those background reports, which again helped inform those goals, policies, and strategies. So it really does give you an idea of the product that we're actually going to produce throughout this process. I also do want to draw attention to the fact that there are certain recommendations in Plan 2040 that direct what we're doing here in the region plan. So for example, if you were to look up the built environment strategy 3.2.b, it says, use the region plan process to explore the need for additional tools to guide neighborhood development, such as area design guidelines, form-based code overlays, or urban design standards. So again, just kind of emphasizing the fact that there are certain things that we will need to address because it's mentioned in this in Plan 2040. And then I just wanted to include a word cloud on the right-hand side there. This word cloud really, you're going to hear a lot of these terms as well. So again, Plan 2040 and this region plan process are pretty similar, that you're going to hear a lot of the same issues. It's just that this region plan process just takes us a little bit deeper so that we can hear some of the more specific issues that are happening within the region. But again, I do want to encourage folks to look over that, look through the introduction of Plan 2040, and then maybe just kind of skim a couple of the sections just so you get a flavor of what that product is and how we'll kind of be replicating that to a certain degree, or I shouldn't say replicating, but taking that same structure and form. So again, any thoughts on Plan 2040? We can also talk about Plan 2040 and some of the highlights when we do that Maryland Department of Planning boot camp, if you will. But any thoughts on Plan 2040? Anything that surprised you or that you liked?
Well, one question I do have, Mark, is how do we ensure and kind of smooth out any differences that our plan would have in regards to 2040? Or should we always be referencing 2040 before we make a decision? Or how do we kind of, because that was clearly different people, different process. We want them to be congruent, but we also want there to be, we want this group to have a say, so how do we iron that out?
Yeah, so that's a good question too, is the region plans do need to be consistent. I think I mentioned that here. They do need to be consistent with Plan 2040, and that is actually codified. However, there are going to be those certain amendments, and again, I hate to always read from a slide, but there are parts where you can, how do I say this, where it does become then an amendment to the GDP. And I provided an example there of the planned land use map, because there were situations during the Plan 2040 process where the Office of Planning and Zoning made recommendations for planned land use applications that property owners provided, that we would actually address it here in the region plan process. And again, that's just one very specific example of the planned land use map. But really, when we're talking about the goals, policies, and strategies, those really should be consistent with the general development plan. And again, if you were to read through that, I don't think that there would be anything wildly different that you as a SAC would propose that would be different. But we can talk about those items. And again, if we need any clarification from the Office of Law, we can always refer to them as well, just to get any interpretation.
Thank you.
So again, what Carrie and I will do is we'll work on, again, finding a time, probably one of those third Thursdays, probably even maybe next month, we can do a crash course in those MVP materials, as well as, again, a high overview of Plan 2040. Okay. So the next slide is, again, I had mentioned this before, really just kind of illustrating the connection between all these plans and how the region plan gets implemented, and really how the Plan 2040, the general development plan, gets implemented. And Plan 2040 being that yellow gear in the middle, really turning the rest of these other gears. But in return, these other gears can also help inform or turn the GDP when we do that again in another 8 years. So for example, the GDP had made a recommendation to develop these region plans, which you see in that green gear in the lower left-hand corner, as well as there are several other plans that we work on. Like I mentioned, Carrie and I are working on an update to the Odenton Town Center Master Plan. There's also an ongoing update to the parole master plan. We also have various other departments that are working on these plans. Like I said, the land preservation plan that the Department of Recreation Parks works on. So there's all this interconnectedness about how each plan can support each other. And Joe, I think maybe going back to your question is, right, what happens when you do have a conflict in one plan, or you have a conflict between two plans or amongst a few plans? Those gears might seize up, because then what direction is the county going in if there are some of these conflicts? So we do want to make sure that for the most part, everything is consistent, or make recommendations on what type of other changes need to happen to these other plans. So that's pretty much the bottom part of this graphic. The plans also talk about any changes to the county code or zoning, for example. It also influences decisions made for the budget with the capital facilities and improvement program, as well as then similar to the code, we have the adequate public facilities ordinance. So again, we do have this graphic in Plan 2040, and just again want to emphasize how these plans are interconnected and how they work together for these areas. Okay, so Joe, I know we're actually a few minutes late here. We had initially planned for a couple-minute break here. Joe, how would you like to proceed?
Let's go ahead and let's take the break, because I think
Okay.
the next part's going to be a discussion. So I think I'd rather have everybody kind of get some blood flowing, get some water. So I have 7:18, so maybe we can reconvene at 7:22. That works?
Sure.
Okay, so why don't we do that? Everybody go ahead, take a break, grab some water, because the next part we do want to have a discussion about how we're going to do community outreach. So get some blood flowing, check on everybody, and then we'll be back in 4 minutes. All right, so we have folks coming back, which is great. Glad we were able to work in the little break. It always helps. I know a lot of us have probably been on Zoom all day anyway, and then in your evening, you're on Zoom too. It's hard to keep going, so I appreciate it. It's nice to be at home, but at the same time, it's makes it a little hard too when you're sitting in the same spot for most of the day. Great. So we have Carrie and Mark back, and looks like other folks are coming back, which is great. So, so like you said, this next part, we really wanted this to be a discussion. You know, it was wonderful seeing and meeting you all in December. And I think the big piece that would be really helpful, I think, for us as a committee to kind of come up with today is what are some ways that we want to do community outreach? And then also maybe some ways that we can possibly track it and keep, you know, just keep be able to keep each other apprised of who's meeting where, especially if we're going to be actually, you know, attending community events or meeting with community associations. You know, we wouldn't want for, you know, me and Nicole to go and meet, you know, asked to meet with the Jessup Improvement Association, and then, you know, someone else asked to meet with that same group, right? So would like to figure out some ways that maybe we can kind of make an easy way for us to coordinate when we're going to do outreach in the ways we do that. So, you know, I think, yeah, I was really happy after the meeting that folks started texting and saying, hey, I heard about this meeting. Can you join this and join that? I think that's awesome. So, you know, I think I'm pretty open in the way we can think about how would we like to have community outreach and what are some ways that we should be doing that.
Thanks, Joe. And I'm going to introduce a tool in just a minute to help us have this discussion. So I did share this with folks before the meeting. You can get to this Jamboard by visiting the URL at the bottom, though, if you don't already have it open on your computer. It's bit.ly/region2jam. And I'm going to go ahead and actually share this screen instead. And have folks used Jamboard before? So this is a collaborative brainstorming tool. Basically, oh, sorry, that's the wrong. I'm doing too many things at once. It's going to allow all of us to look on the same screen and kind of throw ideas onto the board together and work through this community engagement process together. And we're just going to brainstorm some ideas. Sorry, here we go. Can you guys see the Region 2 Community Engagement Brainstorm cover page? Or am I still?
Looks good, Carrie.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so great. So everyone should have access who's able to log in on this. If you don't have access, that's fine. Mark and I can take notes for you in the post-it notes. But basically, oh, sorry, you're fine. It's bit.ly/region2jam.
Great.
Okay. And basically, like Joe kicked us off talking about community engagement and the importance of being able to engage lots of different groups outside and making sure that we're talking to different groups, not just all talking to the same groups. So what we wanted to do was use about, 10 minutes tonight to kind of hear from you all about community leaders we should talk to, places in Region 2 where there definitely needs to be in-person engagement, in-person mapping exercises, in-person surveys. When we met with Keisha and Joe last week to prepare for this meeting, we heard some good ideas from them about, doing some door-to-door engagement with folks in certain neighborhoods. We heard a good idea from them about how Joe mentioned tracking the meetings that SAC members have with HOAs or other organizations outside of this formal public meeting, just to make sure that we're being equitable with that kind of outreach. And we've heard from several folks throughout this process already as we've gotten started, how important it is to have paper versions of as much as possible of everything that we're doing digitally, particularly for engaging with our older adults or folks that don't have digital access, just making sure we have that paper alternative so that people can continue to get thoughts to us without having to come to this Zoom meeting. So I guess you guys can see the Jamboard and see the notes. And if folks just want to call stuff out or raise their hands, Mark and I can enter these sticky notes onto the board, and then they will populate, and we'll go through after the meeting and kind of organize the thoughts that came to us tonight, and then report back to you guys on what the results were. So we've got
I
some
sent a
prompting
request.
questions. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, you're fine.
I
Sorry.
sent a request for access. It made me have to accept access. So I didn't know if you see that came through.
I didn't, and now I can't get to my email currently since I'm sharing my screen. So unfortunately, you're gonna have to use your voice and tell us, and we'll have to capture it for you.
Okay.
But so we've got some good ideas. Someone pre-populated this with the public library in Maryland City as being a good location for in-person mapping stations. You've got this tablets to aid door-to-door engagement. I know we've got a lot of folks from the Russet community on the SAC and folks from Jessup. So we'd love to hear if there's organizations in your communities we should be talking to for sure.
Laurel HOA meeting, of course, you're welcome to that. So we have those monthly. Right now we do them twice a month, but I think we're going to go back to once a month, which would be the third Tuesday of every month. And there's also the Maryland City Community Association. They meet monthly. I'll have to give you the URL on that, or their information. But that is everyone in the 20724. So it's Maryland City, Russet, even the Towers, the Tall Oaks. So we also get rental units, the rental communities in on the meeting as well.
Hey, Carrie, does the county still carry a list of registered HOAs?
We do have, yeah. That's something that our community liaison, Layla, can help us access. So, but it's good to have that reminder on here.
Yeah, Layla's great. I like working with her.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
So I know that I don't know if they're doing it currently or if it's coming up next month. But every Thursday or every week, near me in Odenton at the fire station, they have like food trucks. Maybe trying to work with them and maybe set up something over there to get people involved. Because everyone kind of likes to commune around food. So I think that'd be a good place to kind of be able to talk to people, and they'll be there for a second.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of municipal planning wisdom about always breaking bread when you're having a tough meeting. So getting together with folks at the food truck event, that's great. Thank you.
Are there any churches in our community that might have a lot of parishioners that kind of live in our district?
Kingdom Celebration Center, I actually go there. They have a lot of connections. That's actually how I found out about this in the first place. So I know that they would be a good place to go for sure.
Oh, is that Canaan with like CA?
KCC, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Bacontown church. I'm trying to think of what it is, but it's on Whiskey Bottom. And I don't know, I don't see any representation from Bacontown, but there's a lot of history there. They're descendants of Maria Bacon, who was an emancipated slave, and how the little town had come up. But I'm sure they would be interested in having a say, or at least being reached out to.
Okay.
There's a Laurel Park Impact Fund Committee. The racetrack, there's funds that go into a committee, and the county is just sort of more formalized it, but they are responsible for allocating funding of beautification improvement projects, and so that might be a good opportunity. or a good group to at least meet with and hear from.
And although I don't know right now how much activities that are going on outside, but I know the Maryland Volunteer Fire Department, they have their little community outreach. They have little fire safety days. So whenever they can resume those in public, in person, that would also be a good place to get people.
I think it's probably important to talk to Fort Meade, see what their needs are for the area.
I actually live here, so I could do some of that as well.
Who said that?
I said I live here on Fort Meade currently.
Oh, but I mean, I can't see who's talking.
Oh, sorry.
Nashara. Great. Nashara, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think like Fort Meade and their MWWR, their morale and welfare would be great. Yeah.
And also maybe some I know that they have some organizations that deal with their junior enlisted who are single, to stop them from doing stupid things. So, reaching out with them, seeing maybe what kind of economic development that they can have for not only the families, but the single people. And Fort Meade has been steadily getting over the years, hundreds and hundreds of jobs that have been coming there. So a lot of people that are moving in of all types of military and contracts and government personnel.
They also have a spouse club where that does a lot with the neighborhoods, can get that information out, and a couple of Facebook pages as well. But the spouses club does a lot too.
That's actually one thing we should make clear, is that the Office of Planning and Zoning isn't on Facebook. We don't have a social media presence. So while there are social media pages run by the county, including the Office of Community Engagement and stuff, we don't have one directly. So knowing about that and the conversations that happen on Facebook is really great. And we appreciate that. That suggestion, but I also just want to clarify that we don't have that. So I rely on all of the Facebook spies to tell us what's going on.
In terms of Far West County, there's the Casino LDC.
Yeah.
And then the HOAs around, like the Arundel Woods, Harmon's, JIA, and all of the folks up here in this area. And the gentleman that's on from Shipley Homestead, I spoke to him already.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Hanover in the Shipley Homestead HOA area.
Yeah, so we gotta talk to all those. And then anybody from the mall, I'm sure there's the folks at the mall. We need to talk to them, the property management company or what have you, regarding, malls have been hit pretty hard. So I don't know if that's somebody from EDC or what have you.
The guy from the mall, Gene Cowden, is actually on the LDC over there. So you'd be, hitting two birds with one stone if you went to the LDC in that region.
Perfect.
Great. And as we're thinking about sort of groups that we should talk to, I also want to encourage us to think about like tactics. It's a traditional planning instrument to use surveys, and a lot of our surveys are digital now because of COVID. We're always trying to kind of expand our reach. And so any sort of new tools that you've heard of, or just ideas for how to engage folks, hopefully in a COVID-free environment in the near future. We do hope to do some in-person charrettes as things get going in the next couple of months. But I appreciated this comment yesterday or last week that we got about doing door-to-door engagement. So sometimes we forget the obvious things, and no suggestion is too obvious or small for this conversation if you think of any tactics.
The other thing we need to think about is the school PTA meetings. Never forget the importance of a PTA mom. I happen to be one, but PTA meetings are still going on via Zoom and what have you, and parents definitely can provide feedback, and they definitely want to provide feedback. Schools are very important, and trust me, with all the school board meetings going on, parents have a whole lot to say right about now.
Are there any environmental groups in the area that we should also hear from?
I don't know, there's Patuxent Wildlife Preserve, but they're government, so I don't know.
Wow.
Well, and I know that like we're clearly not on the water, but a lot of things we do impacts the Chesapeake Bay and the watershed. So I'm wondering if like the Chesapeake Bay Foundation or someone that really is thinking about the water stewardship, that's probably really important for us to consider as well, even though we're not on the bay per se.
I think it was a good point to mention the Patuxent Wildlife Refuge. There is a group called the Friends of the Patuxent, which is not a government-based group, and it really drives a lot of outreach with the community, and is very interested in engaging the community to work with the Wildlife Refuge. So it's probably worth reaching out to that group.
There are a couple of water stewards in Russet that went through the program that may be worth reaching out to. I don't know if you can reach out to the folks that run that and get a list of some in this region.
Who are the people in Russet, Nicole?
Mark.
Oh, Mark? Okay.
Mhm.
I'll ask him. Oh, with the thing with Oxbow?
No, it's a program that you go through and become certified as a water steward, but I know Mark went through it. And there's at least one more.
All right.
Carrie, Mark, does a group like this typically work with chambers of commerce?
Totally.
Okay,
what I was just
so yeah, I
gonna
think
say.
talking to the chambers, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, and just to clarify, Mark and we're not starting from zero here. We've been doing a lot of like looking into some of this stuff, but it's really helpful for us to hear from you guys because we just definitely don't know all the groups that are working in all of the areas. But yeah, the chambers of commerce have typically been really great partners on the master plans.
What about property managers that are being run by like apartments? Maybe they can help as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Are you looking to hear the voices of the businesses as well in the communities? You mentioned up at the mall and all that. The National Business Park is obviously 4 million square feet and about 15,000 people out there, and we can get the ear of them if you want to hear what they're interested in, including the government.
Well, I noticed that they had built that little area, trying to do the live, work, play near at the Savage Metro Station. I'm sorry, Mark Station. So I know they're trying to develop a little community there, and I saw a couple places like a coffee station and whatever. But I'm sure they would in that area, which is in Apple Junction, they'd be interested in maybe interested in something they can develop there to attract renters or anybody to come into the little businesses, because I don't think they even know people know it's there unless they live there.
Let's just take a couple more minutes. And again, we're just starting this conversation. This isn't the only chance to brainstorm community engagement. It just gives us a good platform to pitch some ideas to you guys soon. So.
Yeah, I would like.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
I would like to see if we can come up with an idea of trying to engage individual property owners. I think they get left out in the dark. You know, ones that aren't like part of a community per se.
Well, and I think Nicole will agree, as will Keisha and Patience, those hotels on 198 in Laurel. Those are some, they need, you know, they're actually nuisance businesses if we can get something done about them. But we had discussed with the county executive, there are some nuisance businesses in the area as well. And we should look at if we can't shut them down, clean them up or give them an incentive to clean up. The hotels out here, you know, they used to be for the racetrack, but of course racetrack isn't, well, currently, or hasn't been for a few years, as a big of an attraction as it was. And they used to house a lot of military people who were coming in the hotels, but since they've built hotels at or around Fort Meade and with the hotel districts, they lost that clientele. So now it's a lot of homeless family and people of questionable activities. We'll put it like that.
Do we have any agricultural or farmland in this region? Are there any groups that, you know, we should kind of hear their voices too? I don't know.
I do actually know a couple of people that know that they're not agricultural themselves. They work with a lot of different farmers around this area and different parts of the state. The BCFSN, it's Black Church Food Security Network. I actually used to intern with them, and they have a place in Baltimore and I think some places out here and around the area that works with different with different farmers and stuff like that. So they would have honestly probably a lot of information concerning it.
You know, but maybe going along those same lines, are there farmers markets, right? Maybe not necessarily the land itself, but opportunities to touch base with folks that run farmers markets to get fresh food out to folks.
I know a few people that also bring food there as well.
I tried to look into, I was like Googling yesterday about farmers markets in region 2, because I haven't been to one yet. And I actually couldn't find any that were year round or even like too seasonal. So please let us know if you shop at a farmer's market in your community, and it's something that Mark and I can try to connect more deeply with.
I could look for some. I'm not sure if the Amish market counts as one too. I know that's
no, it's just over the line on the PG side, unfortunately.
Okay, well, yeah, but there's also some that's like smaller areas, and I can try and find those.
I mean, the point about the county line though is a good one, because a lot of folks who live in region 2 probably do business in the neighboring counties. So we can also definitely consider how to, you know, have a presence at some markets there if that's going to catch region 2 residents and community members.
You know, I mean, and the only concern I have about the farmers market, although it's always packed on the few days that it's open, it's a lot of that money leaves the state. With the Amish, you know, they take it back to Lancaster County. So, you know, how is that going to benefit the development, or is that just for outreach? Because we could catch people there from the outreach, but as far as.
Yeah, I think it's just for outreach to hear people who are in the area what they need. Yeah. So Carrie, I know that this is really helpful, but I also know we're running a little close on time we want to talk about. So, I mean, this definitely is not the end all be all. I think we got a really, really great head start. So, and I know we really want to cover kind of the virtual drive arounds. And then the other question I think we wanted to kind of get a head start on, Mark, was how do we want to try to track when people are going and meeting with meetings, right? So we had a little bit of discussion about maybe on our Google Drive, and I know everybody's still getting comfortable with Google Drive, but maybe we could set up a spreadsheet on Google Drive with, so that way people could put in if they're going to meet. So for instance, if someone's going to meet and go to the Russet Community Association meeting and talk about the plan, we would have that in that sheet. So that way we knew that meeting had happened, and we can kind of track it. So that's just one way, but if people have other ideas of how to do that, but I think that that's something we really want to do is, I don't want to be bogged down in tracking, but I think it'd be important for us to kind of all know what we're doing.
Carrie and Mark, did you guys look into potentially having a SharePoint site? Is that an option for us?
We haven't had the chance to meet with the other region planners about that, but we have it noted and we'll look into it. In the meantime, we are definitely going to set up a spreadsheet so that we can have that substitute kind of bridge until we're able to find a better solution if there's one available. But yeah, so we will, we will set up a tracking sheet to help folks track who they're meeting with or any questions that might have come up that Mark and I need to answer. And then we'll look into improving tools.
And we can go over that spreadsheet when we sort of, when we talk about the MDP materials, Plan 2040. If anybody else needs another tutorial on Google Drive, we can do that as well. Just sort of go through some of those items. Yeah.
I am going to share screen again real quick. We just wanted to briefly touch base on the potential driving tour, and we know that we're getting close on time here, so we will try to make it brief.
Yeah, so I think what we had mentioned at the kickoff meeting was the idea of doing a driving tour, and the Office of Planning and Zoning would organize a couple buses that could drive us then around the region and with some input from you all, hit some points of interest. And we listed up some of the bullet points of what the purpose would be. I think a lot of that is pretty obvious. But given where we are in the pandemic, maybe now is not, or February is maybe not the best time to get together in person and share space inside a bus. And again, talking with Joe last week, maybe, or let me back up too, is since maybe now is not a safe time to get together in person, we had talked about maybe doing a virtual tour where we could set up a slide deck if you're maybe a little more comfortable with technology, or Carrie, if you want to skip to the next slide, what that would look like. Or you could send us pictures and provide us some information so that at our next meeting, we could go through these slides and say, right, here's an area that needs some help. This is why it needs help. Maybe here are some solutions to address that. And we could do it that way at our February meeting. Or again, talking with Joe last week, maybe we hold off on any virtual driving tour and we wait to do an in-person driving tour of the region, maybe sometime in the spring when it's safer to gather. So Joe, I might actually hand the conversation off to you at this point, and share some of your thoughts or get some feedback from the group.
Yeah, well, that was definitely kind of my thoughts. I would love folks' feedback. I mean, I really want to be very cognizant of Omicron and keeping everybody healthy. And I don't want people to feel excluded because they don't feel comfortable being in driving around together. But I also, me personally, I really like the idea of us being together and like walking a path and looking at a building and pointing and seeing a park together. So I would really like to do an in-person tour, but just not now. But once again, would love everybody's feedback on this.
I absolutely agree. I think you can't get the full scope of what's going on in an area from a picture, like, you know what I'm saying? Because there's some issues, in Jessup that I can't fully get a picture of and get a good way to describe it without launching a drone. And literally because of, Jessup is still pretty rural and there's a lot of acres and 24-acre properties and what have you. And without me live streaming a drone to you, that's the best way for me to show you. And it's just not feasible to do that. It's better for us to get on a bus, when it's safe to do so. As a healthcare provider, I fully support that right now. And to bring you out here on a much warmer day than 27 degrees and get out and walk with you and show you how there's no sidewalks in our community and these children walk in the dark, and how it's a 2-lane road and there's trucks running down here all hours of the day and night, despite the sign that says no trucks. You know what I'm saying? And I have to call the state police every 6 months and have them come out here and enforce that. You know what I'm saying? Those kind of things, it's not adequate for me to show you with a drone and still photos with me standing by the sign as the truck is driving by. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just not adequate for me to do.
I agree. And there's also certain things, sights, the sounds, the smells, getting the whole experience on what that place is like. If you notice the people, the little things that aren't going to be shown, or you just don't get that in-person, I don't know. Even just seeing as how the people react to you, getting the vibe of the neighborhood. That's something that can't be done virtually.
Nothing like walking behind those hotels on 198 for you to get a really nice grasp of what's really going on there, and seeing the broken fence that we can't get the county to repair.
We're fixing that somewhat, but I got to see a lot of little play kitchens outside one of the hotels, and that is something I think that the county needs to look at, is some of the incentives for illicit activity or the homeless. Not that we have to cure homelessness, but looking at, if we're going to economically develop, are we going to displace people, or are we going to give certain businesses a reason not to be nuisances? Because if the county homeless concerns send over people and it's that or an empty room, they're going to take it. Or I think one hotel is being used by some hotel to place their uninsured people because there's all these medical emergencies. And I'm not talking splinters, I'm talking cardiac arrest and displaced this and that. It's people bleeding out after having had major surgery.
I think there should be something done about that, like maybe putting that aside to do something for the homeless, if we can provide any land for that, for homeless people and people that are displaced, rather than or maybe even repurpose one of the buildings specifically for that. That would be a good incentive, I think, rather than just completely taking that away from them and giving no options.
Yeah, so let me pull us back to just the topic of doing a driving tour. And it sounds as if we do want to hold off on that for now, and maybe touch base next month, see where we are in COVID numbers and where folks are feeling comfortable maybe meeting in person. So let's put a pin in that for now. The next slide, though, I do just want to provide an illustration or an example here of the feedback map, which we're going to be producing next month, and just sort of, again, help give folks another opportunity to provide feedback, that being the public, where right now we do have a survey people can respond to. This allows people to now provide feedback spatially, where we've set it up so you can put your comment into one of three different categories, whether it's an existing condition, you love it, or it needs to be fixed, or whether it's just a vacant lot or an underutilized property, and you could see a new swim center there or some other type of community amenity. And we would ask that you then designate that as sort of dream it, that's something that you would like to see in that area. But again, the reason why we included this slide was just to give you some context that what we would be doing on the virtual driving tour, those points of interest that you would be noting and that we would be visiting, would be ultimately fed into this feedback map that the public would also be participating in, just so that everybody is aware of what everybody thinks are important issues within the region. So more on the feedback map when we actually do get that published. And then lastly, I think Carrie's going to jump into some of the homework that we want you all to work on.
Yeah, just real quick. These are just the 5 ongoing tasks. Well, 4, since we're going to table virtual driving tour. But we do obviously want you to think about locations that you think are important to highlight. But we would like to confirm that everybody has gotten access to their Gmail and the Google Drive. Please email us if you're having a challenge. I'm happy to do office hours, one-on-one 15-minute sessions with anybody if you want some assistance there. We do need folks to submit their ethics training and open meeting acts training, proof of having taken it. So we'll establish a folder in the Google Drive that you can just drop a photo of your certificate or a digital copy of your certificate into the folder just for our reference. It looks like most folks have submitted their bios for the hub site. We've got a couple outstanding. So if that's you, you can just email Mark and I a really brief bio that you'd like to have featured. As you guys are looking at each other's bios, if you want to make edits, again, you can just email us and we'll go ahead and update what's posted online for you. We are going to send the charter, resend it with the revision, the one revision that we discussed earlier. And we will also follow up that time with clarification about when to sign and submit that. So everything else, let's say it's due in 2 weeks by February 3rd, and then we will go ahead and clarify the process with the charter for you and provide that information over email really soon. And then just last slide closing as we kind of pivot to having the opportunity for members of the public to ask questions. I just want to make sure everybody has access to this. Reminder that today there is just a really brief survey on the master plan website. That survey is just meant to inform Mark and I and to inform the stakeholder committees about concerns that members of the public have and the ways that you're talking about those concerns. So we're looking forward to using the survey to help us like guide visioning and some of the community engagement. In February, that feedback map that Mark hinted at is going to go live. And then we'll be able to parallel that with a future driving tour. And then in early 2022, it looks like it might be March or April, we're going to try to set up the community visioning session, and we'll be doing marketing around that to make sure folks hear that far and wide. And just a reminder that the SAC meetings are monthly, and going forward now, it sounds like we'll be meeting the 3rd Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. And for folks who are members of the public out there listening, you can continue to find those agendas posted on the region site that's listed there in the highlighted URL. And these are also our contact emails for anyone who needs to get in touch with us in the coming days. And we included Joe and Keisha there as well, in case you want to reach out to a chair or vice chair directly. But yeah, so that's it for us. Again, please be in touch with Mark and I if you need assistance with Google Drive, and we'll send reminders. And then next week we should have this recording and the minutes posted online for folks to review if they'd like.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you both to Mark and Carrie. You guys have put in a ton of work to make this happen, and we really, really appreciate it. And we even pretty much ended on time, which is great. And I also wanted to thank members of the public who joined us. Apologies, we didn't get to kind of the public input session, but you do see my email on here, joef.region2@gmail.com. If you wanted to send me some remarks, or if you had something specific you wanted to talk about, we can definitely chat. I appreciate you being here for 2 hours. I know a lot of this was more functional versus policy or discussion, so I appreciate that. So with that, without any further questions, do I have a motion to adjourn? I see Nicole seconds. Anybody objections? All right, well, we have a motion to adjourn, so we will be done. And we will have our next meeting. I guess that 3rd is going to be February 17th. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Great. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.